Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Welcome back to episode 88 of Inspiration Contagion. We're going to dig deep into the world of business this week, strategy and leadership. Today's episode, I have a special guest with us, Alok Gupta. He's the founding manager partner of Loki Group. Alok is a seasoned expert in providing fractional chief strategy officer and M&A transaction services to a wide range of enterprise companies, from lower middle to larger enterprises. Alok is a seasoned professional with deep-rooted passion for creating enduring value within organizations. With a stellar career devoted to operational optimization, cost reduction, and guiding companies to exceed their growth targets, he brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. His expertise lies in supporting companies in developing strategic plans, identifying organic and value creation projects, and exploring inorganic opportunities, including mergers and acquisitions. With that, welcome, Alok.
Thank you very much. And Holly, Alok, you had it right. We talked about
Ah,
offline.
Alok. Oh my goodness. Alok, I'm so sorry. My
No worries.
goodness. Well, thanks for giving me some grace on that. Let's kick it off right off the bat. I want to ask you, Alok, what makes you an inspirational leader, or what's your secret sauce?
I think what I believe in doing in leadership is it's a combination of you got to be strategic in nature, but you got to help your team figure out their challenges without telling them the answer, right? So you have to help them. They have to struggle through it a little bit, but being there to let them know it's okay to fail, it's okay to make a mistake. We're there to catch them. It's there to learn from that opportunity and help them push them forward. And a lot of the times when they come to me with questions, I don't give them answers. I give them questions back because I want them to think through it. And I think that's what really helps me be an inspirational leader, is helping them achieve their own success and without just telling them the answer, because in my opinion, that doesn't really help them grow. It just gives a band-aid for the situation.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting you bring this up too, because I remember reflecting back on some of my best mentors in my career were the ones that frustratingly would, just like you, not give me the answer and ask more questions. But what's interesting too is, I have four young nephews and I have a lot of friends with children. And I think this applies to good parenting as well, where sure, there are certain situations and circumstances where we want to give our children the answer, or our employees the answers, but at the same time, if we want individuals to grow and transform and build their own confidence, that requires us allowing them, like you said, to fail or to figure things out or lean into their own creativity. And you can't do that if you give them the answers every single time. And I'm sure that it's also challenging to see them struggle or fail as well. And I'm kind of curious if you could share maybe an example or a story around that, where maybe one of your employees or mentees was struggling but had a positive outcome.
Yeah, there's a lot of different stories that can be shared here. I think one in particular is previous life. I was working at a Big Four consulting firm, and we were working on a very large separation of two companies. And the individual on my team, um, fairly new to consulting, but he was helping to drive this specific work stream, how to separate the two pieces between the two entities. Like, hey, what activities go with company one, what activities go with company two? And really, a lot of what I was doing with him was coaching him in how to be better at trying to be three steps ahead of what the client needs. And for consulting, that's a big piece, right? We are working alongside our clients and we're partners with them, but at the same time, we have to help guide them because they're looking to us for advice. And if we don't take that extra effort to think through things to the next level, then we're doing a disservice to ourselves and to them. And so one of the key things I was doing with him is, and now it took long to get done, and it took up more of my time at the moment, but in my opinion, spending those extra hours, those first few weeks, added a lot more time back to me the next few months, where I then didn't have to be as involved going forward. And so we spent that time before he had meetings. I'd spend the day before a meeting, I'd say, okay, let's sit down. What are you going to talk about? Who are you going to talk to? Who is the audience? What are you trying to achieve? What's your goal? And I really forced him to think through it, because I think, in this situation, too often people are like, oh, I got the materials ready. I'm going to go in this meeting and I'll just talk about the materials. And that sounds like what you should do, but that doesn't really add to a lot of creative conversation and deriving value out of that meeting. What's better is if you now assess that work that you did, think about what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve, and get those ready to go, and basically be able to go into that conversation ready to talk about what the options are, and go in with options instead of trying to create options on the fly. And again, first few weeks we spent extra time doing it, and then there were a couple of weeks when he started coming to that meeting saying, "Hey, here's what I'm going to do, Alok." I'm like, "This is great. Let's go." And after that point, I was like, "Hey, I don't need to check your work. You're good to go." And he was able to go on his own. Another similar situation, I was working on an international acquisition, separation, combination of things, and I was working with an international colleague of mine on my team, and brilliant woman. And she was writing these emails, and she was like, "Hey, look, here's the email for you to send to the client." I was like, "You did the work. I want you to send the email to the client. You need to get the credit, not me. But let's go through this and let's help clean it up." And so we did that for a while, where I would review her emails of what she needed to get accomplished and get through the client, help her word it. Again, after a week or so of doing so, when I started seeing drafts of emails that sounded the way I basically no edits, then I was like, hey, you don't need me to edit it anymore. Go ahead and send it. Just keep me copied on it. And again, that was something that she took going forward, saying like, this is how she's now working going forward, how she trains her team, and it's added a lot of value to her and how she's progressed. She's now a partner in that law in that consulting firm.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting nuggets of wisdom in those two stories and examples. So, the first thing I will recognize and commend is that when you're being a good mentor, a good leader, and you're adding inspiration to your employees, your mentees, it does require more time, right?
Yeah.
And if to add that value to them as well as eventually to you requires a significant amount of investment of time, energy, and resources. But the reminder there is that when you do this the right way and you don't
Hmm.
give up and you allow them to do it in their own unique way based on their skill set, it's very powerful. And in fact, I'm listening to this book called, I think it's like 10x is easier than 2x or something. I'm sure you've read it. And listening to it again, and how when we show up as more of a 10x leader and we train our employees to be 10x employees, it's a very different mindset than that 2x mindset. But it does take that initial investment of time, energy, and resources, which is very inspiring. So I'm grateful you're doing that. I want to ask you specifically, though, outside of being an inspirational leader, how would you define inspiration, or what does it mean to you?
How do I define inspiration?
Mm-hmm.
Inspiration is, it's intrinsic, where something is motivating you to do more, and something is motivating you to go further. Something is moving you forward, and that can come from a lot of different places, right? It comes from personal growth. It comes from a desire to achieve ambition. It can come from family and friends, and wanting to support that. Um, but there's a lot of different sources for inspiration, and again, it comes back to internally becoming that motivation to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I wrote my first book, I have a whole chapter on sourcing inspiration and finding your own internal drivers, anywhere from music to movement
Hmm.
to speakers to books to anything. And it's very unique and personal to each individual. And the longer I interview folks and ask them these questions, the more I am certain that there is no one thing that inspires us all. It's very, very specific and unique and customized to each of us. But that's what's really cool is that the more we can help our employees, our
Mm.
teams, our communities source their own internal motivation and inspiration, and then leverage their superpower abilities, then we have this massive positive ripple effect. I want to pivot a little bit though. I want to ask you some questions about peak performance. I want to ask, how do you define peak performance and how did you arrive at this definition within your agency and your group?
So peak performance is, um, I mean, this is a great and very multi-layered type of question because it builds off of inspiration, it builds off of kind of ambition, it builds off of a lot of different pieces. But peak performance is it can be individual, but it can also, in my opinion, be team oriented, right? So especially if you're looking think about business, it's not an individual sport, it's a team sport. So if one person is at peak performance but everyone else is not, you're only as good as your weakest link, right? And so to really be at peak performance, it's you got to think about holistically and what that really means. And so, yes, you can first start with yourself and get yourself to a peak performance opportunity, but then you got to think about how can I help uplift those around me. And know what we do at Low Key Group is when we work with clients, that's the key thing. What we try to do is try to uplift everyone that we work with and all the management team, the executive team to be at peak performance. And a lot of times it's showing them how to do something in a different way. It's helping them with analysis that they didn't think about, and we show them opportunities, and it really opens up their minds, and they're like, oh wow! And it's about including them in the options and the decision that we drive forward. So in peak performance, it really is top down. If you think about an organization, where if the top provides the opportunity for peak performance, provides the foundation and the culture for it, it can help manifest throughout the rest. And that includes things such as, in my opinion, my peak performance includes um, when there's a challenge in the place, then you focus on the challenge, not on the individual. Challenge and when mistakes happen, right? And again, you can't really blame the individual for the mistake. You talk through it, you learn from it, you grow from it, but it's not about blaming anyone. It's about focusing on the challenge and moving beyond it. So that's one. And making sure that your culture supports, hey, we're going to have disagreement, we're going to have issues and challenges. Let's focus on the challenge. Let's focus on the task on hand. And it's not about each other. It's about let's do this together. Two, kind of building off of that is mistakes are okay and they provide learning opportunities. So what did you learn from that opportunity? And if you have a culture where people are always um, being criticized for mistakes or being villainified for a mistake, they won't try anything, and and your organization would
Sounds
just
like
be in
I
stale
lost you there.
mate constantly. So you have to have an environment that is open to risk. Three is then encouraging of activities and those who try and those who go forward, right? So it's not just only of accepting issues and challenges, but then of, encouraging those to go beyond, those to do more, not just stay with the status quo. And I think with those kind of three pieces, those three legs of the table or stool, you can really create a peak performing team.
I love that. Lots of wisdom in there. I like how we started with the fact that it really requires a holistic approach. You're speaking my language. It really does. And for me, holistic means health, clarity, and business. And that starts with, like you said, that top down approach, the leader having the right vision, the right values, the right culture, the right space for employees to show up and be human, and one of the reminders I have to remind myself of, my clients of, people in the world, we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect, and
Hmm.
we are not superheroes. We are human. I have to remind myself every day, Holly, you are human. You're not bionic woman. I wish I was bionic woman, but I am human. And so, of course, I'm going to make mistakes. In fact, I want my employees to make mistakes and, like you said, learn from them so they can be successful. So, yes, creating that culture, looking at things from a holistic lens. and then making sure that every single person on the team is achieving peak performance with their own superpowers as a human is so essential for innovation, creativity, and amazing cultures to grow. Now, we all know this doesn't happen perfectly and magically overnight. So, what are some of the challenges or obstacles that you faced along your journey to building peak performance at Loki Group?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first was, I mean, building Loki Group, I was leaving a very nice career and salary at a big four consulting firm, right? And starting my own thing. That was my biggest challenge. But, I'd say outside of that, personally, it was picking up all these learnings and putting it together. It was learnings I received from other partners, senior managers that I worked with that I admired, and I wanted to, you know, carry the same thing forward, as well as those that I did not admire and those who I learned things I did not want to do, and I wanted to do things differently, and taking that into account as well. Basically, pulling these pieces together to figure out who I wanted to be as a leader itself and who I thought was a good balance. I still work on it every day. By no means am I perfect right now. I am continuing to build and learning each day about get how to achieve the most from the team that we have and what we're trying to do and make sure that they're incentivized and feeling appreciated as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point is there are things that we learn from others around us that we want to do more of, right? Cuz they make us feel good, they elicit good feelings, good motivations. And then of course, we've all learned from former consulting gigs, former corporate gigs, just life experience the things we don't want to do. And those are equally important. The lessons that we certainly don't want to pass on to our own companies, our culture, our employees. And so I think it's really an important key point to have clarity of how you want to show up as a leader, how you don't want to show up as a leader, what you want in your company culture and what you want to weed out as the bad apples in your company's culture. So specifically tied to that, how do you create a culture of peak performance in your company? How did you do that at Loki Group?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of personal time with each employee, right? And it's giving them that coaching, giving them that mentoring, giving them that guidance that they seek. We've told each of our team members this is a very entrepreneurial organization. I tell them from the get-go, I want you to be, I want you to take a risk. I want you to come to me with options. I want you to come to me with ideas and tell me what your recommendation is. Don't come to me with just a question because then it feels like you didn't really think through it or try, right? And I don't really know all the context. So when you have a question, you got to help fill me in. Give me some ideas of what you think the answer is, and that will help me understand the context and options. And maybe it's not one of the three options you give me, maybe it's some mix of it, or at least it lets me know how you think about it, and it'll allow me to ask questions as to, well, why did you think about this option? What else could we do, and how can we work through this? And that way, it's not just a moment to answer, but it's a moment to really learn and think through what's trying to be done and how do we achieve it together. Um, and it's it's work. It's time and time again work. Um, Now that I have two small kids, it's been a little bit more of a challenge because I don't all the time I would have to devote to my team and to devote to the culture, like cultivating them and encouraging them. I got to kind of split it a little bit, right? Because when I didn't have kids, hey, I was available whenever they needed me. I could talk to them. I could coach them. Let's go through it. So I've had to learn a new balance, and that's been my own challenge to work through. But that's definitely something that we've had to do. And then I'd say another piece that's been very important is I had to learn that um, not only is each person different and needs to be mentored in a different way, well, actually, before each person being different, it's each generation is different as well. Where folks that I've mentored that are in their 30s, late 30s, etc., they generally work in a certain type of way, and I can coach them a certain way, and then you individualize it based on that person. But then those who are in their 20s and mid 20s or early 20s or late 20s are very different than those that were in their 30s and above. And so I'm having to learn a new way of coaching them, and how do I then encourage them and move forward on that aspect. So it's again one of those learning aspects. You got to coach individuals as they need to be coached, and you got to tailor it, and you got to adjust yourself as well, because I can't stay the same Alok for each employee. It wouldn't work.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up the cross generation shifts of coaching and mentoring and creating a culture for employees. And I was actually just interviewed on, I think it was CBS or something around this specifically, and how different these cultures are generationally, right? And how they have totally different prioritization, different drives for what encourages them in the workplace and all of that, and how it can create a lot of conflict in cultures across the generations. So I'm glad that you're aware of that. The other key thing that you shared that I thought was insightful is, and this is something that a mentor shared with me early in my career as well, is don't come to me with questions. Come to me with ideas and answers. And I found that always so frustrating because I couldn't just go to him with a question. I had to come up with 5 to 10 solutions that could work, or were at least the beginnings of something that could work, versus just having him lay it out for me. So really, really great sage wisdom. And yes, it takes a lot of time and personal touch to create anything that's worth creating, especially a culture that thrives on peak performance. Now, I want to shift just slightly. How important would you say the employee experience is to peak performance at Loki Group?
I'd say it's very important, right? Because if the individual is not happy in what they're doing and how they're doing it, then you're not going to get peak performance. And then not only will you not get peak performance, but then you'll get an employee that's not going to stay very long. And what happens then is all that time and effort you went into coaching them, if they're then gone, it's then you got to go and do it again. Which, if they leave because they're unhappy, hey, shame on you. You could have done a better job on coaching them and training them and getting them ready. If they're leaving because they're happy and they found a better opportunity, then I'm actually happy for them. And unless I can compete and give them a better opportunity in encounter, then I there's absolutely no ill will, right? It's like I because the whole point of coaching an individual and helping them perform better is to help them achieve more, and it's more about them than about me and about Loki Group, right? I coach them because I want Loki Group to do well, I want them to do well, I want us myself to do well. But at the end of the day, it's about their growth, their performance, and they need to do what's best for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and this is what I like to drive home with my clients, is that when you don't invest significant time, and I mean significant time, into the employee experience, it has direct impacts on your customer experience,
Hmm.
direct impacts on your revenue, your lead gen, your sales, all of the things that fundamentally make a business successful. You want happy people. It's very, very essential. You want to make sure that they have ways that they're driven and excited, and they see growth opportunities. They can see their own personal vision aligned to what you're doing in the organization. So it's really worth the time and investment. I want to ask you, how have you optimized your customer experience?
Hmm. Great question. So, how have I optimized my customer experience? um, I mean, again, no two customers are alike. When we go to each customer, it's always about finding out who they are, what they're trying to achieve. And honestly, that's what we do at the core is as a fractional chief strategy officer, is we have to go in and figure out their business and figure out how their business needs to grow. And, an idea that worked for an electronic company is not going to work for a building products company. And so it's really working with them on those goals and helping them think through their goals. And sometimes when the goals come in, like, okay, that's all you just looking for a 3% growth next year. Is that really a good strategic target, or can we go higher? Because I think there's opportunities that we can go higher and then, you know, fall somewhere in between. I think, a lot of it's really just working with them and working with um, our executive sponsor from the client side to make sure that we are delivering upon what they're looking for, and then coming back to the rest of the team to make sure that they're all able to perform to that level, right? And that's how we measure our own success, and we work with each customer to make sure that they're happy with the work that we do.
Yeah. No, it's a good reminder that no human out there, customer, employee, leader, is alike. And we all like it when we feel seen and heard. So make sure that your customer experience really dials in and digs into their pain points, what they want to get, and refines their goals and strategies so that they are on the same page. So we're going to pivot just a little bit. We're going to talk about revenue, everybody's favorite thing to talk about. I want to ask you, Alok, when have you left money on the table and what did you do to fix it?
Yeah. Well, it depends why the money was left on the table. I'll say that, right? Like if the money was left on the table because I was short-sighted and I wasn't like thinking about it, and I was again it depends on as it because I was signing an SOW and I shortchanged what the work needed to be done and it was a lot more, or did I make a bad deal, right? And I just wasn't paying attention. Um, you know, it's a little bit difficult just because it depends on the scenario. But what I'll say is there's been times where I've structured a deal and I left money on the table. Part of the reason I may have done it was because and I made sure the other person knows, like, hey, I should be asking for more, but I'm not. It was to build goodwill, right? I'm trying to build goodwill with the client, like, hey, client, I should be charging you more, but I'm not going to charge you more right now because I want to show you that we're worth it. I want to build goodwill with you, and I hope that you sign us on for phase two, and then our rates will be normal at that point. Um, and there have been times when money's been left on the table, and again, I just made a bad deal. I wasn't thinking through all the scenarios. But what I've done is I've then said, well, wait a second. When I signed the deal, was I happy with what I signed with and what I was getting out of it? Did I get out of it what I was anticipating? If I did, then I should be happy for what I did attain and not be sour because I didn't think about this other opportunity and the other side made more, right? And again, as long as I'm getting out of it what I thought I was going to get out of it, that's what I should focus on first and not think about the other piece that I did not think about that the other side may have benefited from.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. Is that sometimes, because we're human, as a reminder, we might miss something in a statement of work. We might miss something in a deal. We might not be at the very best version of ourselves that day. But I like how you pivoted the perspective on that and asked, are you happy with it? Did you get what you expected out of it? Instead of being hung up on the shoulda, coulda, would have, which there's nothing we can do. It's out of our control at that point. Instead, you're looking at the positives, which I think is really important when it comes to money. A lot of us will think about, and we have like that bias in our brain of just looking at the bad side of things, but it's equally important, especially when it comes to our finances, to see the value that we did get from it. And it seems like also with those situations for goodwill, it was more intentional, and I'm sure that created really great customer experience and loyalty, so that makes a lot of sense. um
Holly, one quick thing I want to
yeah.
add is just, well, I remember in business school, one of the professors telling the stories like, yeah, like you were saying, people, someone's walking down the street and they find a $20 bill. It's like, oh, I found a $20 bill to put in the pocket. The next day, they somehow lost $20, $10. They'd be more upset about the $10 they lost than and forget about the $20 that they found, even though they're technically $10 in the positive. And so, hence, one of those things then from that day, I started trying to think to myself is, okay, yes, what is the positive here? Am I still ahead from what I thought I was going to be and drive forward that way?
Yeah. I mean, it's like very interesting even when you've been doing this work for a long time and you're aware of the negativity bias. I will just say, admittedly, I just got back from a phenomenal trip to Patagonia. Phenomenal trip. But there were a lot, and I mean a lot of challenges. And so when I came back and friends would ask me, "How was your trip?" At first, like the first few days, I was like, "It was amazing, but it was really stressful." And I had to talk to one of my coaches, and they were like, "Just tell me all the amazing things." And so I started talking about those, and I was like, it was an amazing trip. But we're so biologically trained. Like our brains are just so wired to look at the negative because in the
Hmm.
past it helped us survive. So if you're listening to this and that's happened to you, you're not alone. And it's something we have to fight every day. And even when you've done it for decades, it still comes back and haunts you.
Yep.
So just remember, focus on the good. And that's why I have what I call the jar of positivity and jar of awesomeness, is because when you have those days where the wiring gets broken and you get lost in that spiral, you can go back to the good stuff and get back on track. But just kind of wanted to point that out because it's really, really important and really hard to do. Okay, my last question on revenue for you, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask. What is the next shiny object that you would like to turn into a revenue stream at Loki Group?
Oh, nice. Honestly, it's what I really like doing is it's kind of a combination of doing the advisory piece, but it's helping a business grow to then help them exit, right? And create that exit. Now that exit may be to another buyer, to a private equity firm, or strategic buyer, or maybe they want to do like an ESOP or sell it to another individual, whatever it is. But that's the new piece, like kind of helping them bridge, not only do the growth, but then help them to get it over the line onto the market and sell it. And not like a broker or investment banker, but a very kind of close knit type of a introduction matchmaking type service. Like, hey, I know a number of buyers that are either PE firms or strategic opportunities that I've connected with through my career that may be interested in different types of businesses and helping bring those together.
I like that. It's kind of like I know that we've got, for example, matchmaker.fm and Podmatch for matchmaking on podcasts. It's the exit strategy and buyer strategy of creating that perfect match. And if you really think about it, it makes perfect sense because when you're looking for example, a co-founder or somebody who's
Hmm.
going to be a significant leader on your team, it's like getting married, right? You have to
It
kind of
is.
date first, you have to make sure it's a fit. Same thing goes if you're selling and exiting your business. That's your baby. You created that thing.
Yeah.
You spent time with it, blood, sweat, and tears. We talked about throughout this interview the personal investment of time and resources into creating that culture so that it can thrive and be successful. So I'm sure that's a very intimate, delicate thing, is matching somebody who's trying to exit their business to the right person who's purchasing it. So I'm excited to see where you guys go with that. And as soon as I come up with a really exciting name for it, I'll share it with you because I was like, my mind was spinning as you shared that.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to wrap up with a couple of rapid fire questions. What is the best one piece of advice you would share with others today?
um, wow. I'm not very fast apparently.
That's okay.
The one piece of advice is, I mean, personally, I always try to be strategic in nature, so try to think 5, 10 years in advance of where or who I want to be and have that be my goalpost. You have to have a goalpost to work towards, and as you make each decision, think about how that decision helps you towards that goal.
Perfect. And what's the legacy you wish to leave behind?
um, the legacy I wish to leave behind is basically that try to be a good person, do good business, and what I thought was fair business to all parties involved, and really help as much as we can preserve jobs and grow opportunities for individuals that didn't know about opportunities to grow.
Perfect. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Alok. This is a wonderful interview. Lots of nuggets of wisdom, lots of value. For our listeners, if you want to follow Alok or learn more about Loki Group, you can look to the show notes. There are some links in there for his website, his LinkedIn, his Twitter, so you can follow them and get in touch with Loki Group. Thank you so much, Alok.
Thank you, Holly. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. To our listeners, I'll see you on our next episode. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.